Chapter 10, Meltdown. The field at Indian Creek Elementary couldn't be used for league games, so Luma arranged for the Fugees to host their home matches at Ebster Field, a perfectly maintained grass pitch in Decatur, a 15-minute drive from Clarkson toward downtown Atlanta. Luma got a YMCA bus to drive her players back and forth between Decatur and Clarkson and gave them instructions to meet at the Clarkson Public Library at 1 p.m., an hour before game time. Anyone who was late, she told them, would be left behind. The under-15s first regular season game was on September 10th against the Gwinnett Phoenix, a club team from Liburn, Georgia. Liburn was only 10 miles from Clarkson, but in many respects it was a world away. Liburn was mostly white, middle and upper middle class. It was also soccer country. The Gwinnett Soccer Association was founded in 2000 and was a home to girls and boys teams of all ages that together had won more than a dozen state championships, as well as the 2001 national championship in girls soccer. A huge group of parents, siblings, and friends accompanied the Gwinnett Phoenix team to Decatur and set up camp on a sideline with folding chairs, blankets, coolers, and picnic lunches. The Fugees' sideline, as usual, was empty. Luma expected the YMCA bus to show up at Ebster Field by 1:15. At 1:30, though, the bus was still nowhere in sight. Luma looked at her watch and shook her head. The Phoenix took the field and began warming up. Luma pulled out her cell phone and called the bus driver to see what was going on. Some of the players hadn't shown up, he reported. He'd waited as long as he could and was now on his way, but without the whole team. A few minutes later, the bus pulled up and the under-15s began to climb off. Only 9 players had shown up, 2 short of a full team. Mandela Ziti had made the bus. He sat on the bleachers, counting players as he tied the laces of his cleats. Disgusted, he shook his head. Mandela had hoped that Fornity and the others had gotten their own rides to the game. It was only now settling in that the simply hadn't shown up. Mandela was angry. Playing 9 against 11 was not the way to win soccer games. Not only that, it was close to 95 degrees and very humid. With no substitutes, each member of the Fugees would have to play the whole game in the heat without a break. The under-15 stood just not to lose, but to lose in a very tiring way. Mandela sat next to me on the bleachers and asked to borrow my cell phone. I let him, and he began frantically calling his teammates to see where they were. He reached Fornity at his apartment. Fornity had missed the bus and was now stretched out on the sofa watching television. Mandela asked me if I had a car. My rental car was parked within view. He wanted to know if I would drive him to pick up Fornity and 2 other members of his team. If we left right away, he thought we could make it back by game time. I hesitated, worried what Luma would think, whether my helping Mandela round up his teammates might look like I was helping them break the rules. Tracy, the Fugees' team manager, was nearby. I asked her advice. She said she thought it would be all right. Mandela and I jogged to the car and were off. At 1:55, we pulled back alongside the field with 3 new players, including Fornity in the back seat. The boys sprinted onto the field to join warm-ups, which were already in progress. Luma, though, wasn't with her players. Instead, she was standing in a corner of the field, giving no instruction to the team. "Coach," shouted Kanu Bia, the librarian veteran, "why are you not talking to us?" "Because there's nothing to say," Luma replied. She turned back on her players, walked to a set of bleachers in the shade at the far end of the field, and sat down. Only Kanu seemed to understand that something serious was going on. A veteran member of the Fugees, he was devoted to the team. Kanu was always on time and more than other players had brought into Luma's system. He decided to take charge. A moment later, the referee called the players to the midfield stripe to go over their player cards. One by one, the boys stepped forward and said their names. The teams took their positions on the field, the referee blew the whistle, and the game was underway. Luma was still sitting far from the field in the shade, arms crossed, silent. Minutes into the game, the Fugees were called for a foul in the box. Setting up a penalty shot for the Phoenix, the Fugees goalie dove left, the ball went right. The parents on the Phoenix sideline jumped to their feet and cheered. The Phoenix led 1-0. The Fugees began playing more aggressively. They were called for one offside penalty, then another and another. Fornity shouted at the referee in protest and drew a yellow card. To cheers from the Phoenix sideline. A moment later, the Phoenix scored again, 2-0. Mandela was angry now and determined to get a shot on goal with or without help from his teammates. He took the ball on a pass from Fornity and dashed up the middle of the field, fighting his way through the Phoenix defense and shielding the ball with his large frame. He dribbled to his right, across the top of the box, and blasted a shot high to the right. The score, 2-1. The Phoenix responded minutes later on a crisp cross to an unmarked forward right in front of the goal. The score was now 3-1. Just before the half, Fornity got free up in the middle. He made his move, quickly tapping the ball into an open space to his right. He had a wide-open shot, but he had hesitated just enough to let the Phoenix goalie move out to cut off the angle. "Shoot it!" his teammates yelled. Fornity took the shot, but it was blocked. The whistle blew twice, signaling the half. The Fugees gathered near midfield and looked toward Luma, but Luma stayed where she was, head down in the shade, refusing to even make eye contact with her players. "You see our coach right there?" Fornity fumed to his teammates. "She's got a job to do. I can't be the coach. You look at her. She's sitting right there." "Play on," Kanu said. "You got to play on. We've got to come together. When you get the ball, kick it," someone snapped at Fornity. "Coach has never did this to us," Fornity said. "She's got a job. That's why she's a coach. This is her job." He paused and took a breath. The other Fugees stood in silence. "We're not going to worry about that," Fornity said, collecting himself. "We're just going to play. 3-1 isn't that much. I'm sorry I had a shot. That won't happen again. If I'm open like that, I'm going to score. I promise y'all." Everyone started shouting at once. "One at a time," Fornity said before taking the floor again himself. "Let me tell you something. Coach is just a coach. She cannot show us how to play soccer. Is she playing? No, we are. The skills we got, we don't need her. She's just going to talk. She cannot come on the field and play for us. We got to play for ourselves. It don't make no difference if she's sitting down because she's not playing for us. Don't no coach play. They coach, but they don't come in the game and play. We got to do that for ourselves. She's trying to make us think that we can't play without her," he continued. "She's trying to test us, man. She's trying to make us realize that we need to win this. When the second half comes, we start scoring," Fornity said. "We can win this, man. There's got to be a reason why she's not coaching now, but it don't matter, man. We got to win this game, man. We got to win this game. Get your hands in here," Kanu yelled. The young men formed a circle and stacked their hands on top of the other. 1, 2, 3, they chanted. "Go, Fugees!" Minutes into the second half, the Phoenix forwards picked their way through the Fugees' defense and tapped the ball into the left side of the net for an easy goal. The score was now 4-1. The Fugees were yelling at one another. After another offside call, Fornity cursed at the referee, drawing his second yellow card and an ejection. The Phoenix parents and friends were quiet now. There was no need to pile on. The Fugees were tired, and without their coach, they were lost. The Phoenix scored again and kept scoring. When the referee blew the whistle 3 times to signal the end of the game, the score was 7-2 Phoenix. After the game, the Fugees gathered on their bench in silence, drinking water from plastic cups until Luma called to them from across the field to get on the bus. As the players filed off the field, I asked her what's going on. "They show up to tutoring late," she said. "They're disrespectful. They show up to practice not dressed to play, their pants hanging down. I tell them practice is at 5:30. They show up at 6:30. I tell them you have to be at the field at 1 o'clock for a 2 o'clock game, and they're coming, like 10 minutes before the game? It's not going to work," she said. "So I was like, the way they're behaving is the way I'm going to behave. They're being irresponsible, and I'm not going to be accountable for them." She told me that she thought about going to get a hamburger, but the referee told her before the game that if she left the field, her team would have to forfeit. So she decided to sit and watch what she knew would be a meltdown, especially on the part of Fornity. "He can't handle it when I get mad at him," she said. "They don't have the discipline to hack it. They don't show up to practice. They don't show up to the game. You can't compete like this." With that, Luma walked away, trailing behind her players as they walked toward the bus. She waited for them to board and take their seats. A moment later, she climbed onto the bus to address her players and give them the news. Luma had decided to cancel the under-15 season. They would forfeit the rest of their games. There would be no more practice or tutoring sessions. The under-15s were finished.